Hello everyone. I decided to record today's course into video because next week the project that you're required to submit requires these methods, basic usage of material creation, material properties, lighting and rendering basics. So we'll dive into the material editor, then we'll pass on to the lighting fundamentals, and I'll talk about rendering techniques basically that will require for the next week's submission. So let's start with the material editor. So any object that you create in your scene comes with a default material, which is great, which is something like this. So whatever object that you create, it comes up with that default grayish material. But if you want to change that, for example, if you want to add different material properties, reflection, bumps on the surface and that kind of stuff, you need materials, right? So for that, we have a button here called Material Editor, Material Manager. So if you click on that, an empty window opens, an empty section opens, and if you hit and hold this plus button here, it provides you different materials. But by default, the rendering technique, this material is created according to the rendering engine that you're using. So I'll be showing physical render. So we'll change the rendering render engine to that. So click to this button called Render Settings, and it opens this window. And from here, render, you should select standard or physical. Let's go on with physical. Just do that for now. And now, if you click and hold this, the material list changed, right? So I'll be showing you standard or PBR material. So let's check PBR material. Okay, we'll go on with the PBR material because PBR materials are physically based materials. So they allow you to create materials based on physical properties of objects. And it's all heavily used in game engines. So it's optimized for that also. But we'll be basically seeing this material type. So you can either, for example, you can either go here and click here from the new PBR material, or you can double click to here, an empty space, and it will create an additional material for you. So when you click on the material, this attributes panel opens up its properties, attributes, right? But before that, in order to see how this changes here are reflected on the viewport, I'm going to assign this to an object by clicking and dragging to one of the objects. Or let's assign to both of the objects, okay? So that we can see how they react to different color changes. Okay, so you can hide and show this material manager by clicking here. And then, for example, you can select this material and start editing its properties. By default, it's only reflectance. These are the channels, by the way, channels of the material that are, or different sets of parameters that define how this material is going to behave when it's hit by light rays or light, okay? So by default, the reflectance channel is open. If you disable that, it becomes nothing is enabled here, so it becomes a complete black item. No reflections, no shadows, no shading and that kind of stuff. You can enable color. And for example, you can go to the basic again, and again, enable reflectance. And notice how it changes its properties or appearance, let's say, okay? So we won't see all of these, but for example, instead of reflectance, if you click luminance, it makes it a light emitting object, okay? This is now a spherical light or a cubical light now. So when you render, it will illuminate its surroundings in your renders. So luminance is like that, and let's reflect again, select reflectance, and from here you can play with the channels that you've created in your material. So let's go to the reflectance, or let's change the color first. So you can, in this section, you can either open this part or click on this color here and start to change the color. Okay, but notice that how, okay, let's disable reflectance first. Okay, let's play only with the color. So I can either click here or change from here that the color properties of that item material. So brightness, again, if you drag it to the bottom, it becomes like something without any channel here. So brightness is like that, and texture is something different. You can assign images. You can use images to create different sets of appearances, like for example painted textures, UI elements like that, and that kind of stuff are assigned via the texture part here. And I won't be diving into all the properties, but I'll provide you an overview of how these work. And yeah, you can change the color from here. And for example, let's create another material by double clicking here. And by the way, when you assign a material to an object, you can see that that material is assigned through these tags here. So when you want to change that material, for example, you can either delete that tag and it becomes the default material again, and then drag this onto this or onto this so that that new material is assigned, or undoing that, or you can click and drag this material to the old, on top of the old material like this, and it replaces that material. Okay, let's make this not reflectance, but make it red. Okay, now they both have only the color channel enabled, right? So now I want to also add the reflectance channel, so reflective properties. So when you add that reflectance channel, you can see that there's some kind of red left, but it has transformed into a near white sphere, because like the reflectance attribute has this color value here in as white. So if I change that to red also, now you can see that it's red and reflective. Okay, so instead of maybe I want a mirror-like reflectance here. So for that, I need to change this type from Lambertian to, for example, Beckmann or GGX. So GGX is the one that I use mainly. So when you change that, it starts to become something like a metal ball, right? So you can adjust the roughness. For example, if you increase the roughness, it becomes something as if it's brushed metal or something like that, or the surface is very rough, so it diffuses the light more. If you decrease the roughness, it becomes like a mirror ball. Okay, so reflection strength is like this, specular strength. Okay, that's not visible here. And you might wonder that where this reflection is coming from, right? This is called an environment map, and every Cinema 4D scene has a default environment map like this, which is used to signify or used to render over reflective objects. Okay, so you can change that, but we'll be seeing that later on. Okay, so yeah, roughness is like this, and you can change the color from here. And notice that if I change from red to green, red is still left on the surface of the material, because that's coming from this color value there. So if I change that, or for example, if you want a perfectly shiny surface, you can maybe disable color so that only the reflectance channel is open, and this value is directly determined by this color that you're using here. So that instead of like a combination of two different colors, this only uses this color that you're seeing here. Okay. So obviously, for example, you can add different textures to that. For example, okay, let's disable reflectance and go back to color. By the way, before doing that, let's say I want to assign this to the cube also, so that you can see how it behaves on a cubic surface. Okay, so it becomes something like a mirrored cube, right? So let's change the color to blue maybe. And now yeah, let's create another sphere. And now create another material, assign this to this. And now let's add a texture to that. For example, disable reflectance, enable color, and in the color tab here, let's add a texture to this. To add a texture, you can click this arrow here, and you can either load an image like a PNG, JPEG, and that kind of stuff, TIFF, and even PSDs, and you can also create some procedural textures, like for example noise or gradient or different effects or different, like for example shaders. Let's say a checkerboard pattern, for example. On the surface here you have very different procedural textures. So if I add checkerboard, you can see that it's covered with a checkerboard pattern, and this texture here is assigned like this. And if you click on top of this image here, you can see the parameters of that material there, right? So you can play with those materials like that. So of course this is, if you want to go to the previous properties, you can click here to the go up one level button, so that it returns back to the main window here. So also you can combine this with reflectance, and let's see what happens. Again, it makes this white, but I want this not I want this to be green but also reflective at the same time. So I can change the type to GGX again, and you can see how it behaves, right? But the blacks are not so dark, so maybe I can play with the brightness of the material and just add a little bit of brightness maybe. Or yeah, you can see that how these values affect the reflectance of the object. But if you, for example, add this checkerboard pattern, the same pattern, to the reflectance channel, to do that, for example, you can click here and click copy shader and go to reflectance, and here again the color part has a texture part here. The reflectance property has a texture part here. If you go here and add paste shader, you'll see that it has become a much more, again, shinier object, and now it doesn't affect these properties, doesn't affect this, because the color value is coming directly from this from here. So if I go and disable color, yeah, it does something. And if you delete the channel from here, yeah, it's basically a white sphere with green stripes that are reflective. So I can change this to that, or for example, I can change the color to that. So notice how different combinations of textures and values are reflected on the material surface. So I won't keep this complex, so this can get even more complex. So I'll be showing some tips and tricks on the next class, but you can see that the material properties can be changed like this. Okay. So yeah, okay, it's recording. Okay, so the standard materials are like this. And for example, if you want some rough or textured surfaces, let's check. For example, let's create another material and an object. Let's delete this and double click here, create another material, assign this to here, and click to this material, and then go to the color channel again. So, and go to the color tab. And in terms of texture, for example, I can add a gradient, right? So it is covered with gradient. Or add, let's say, another surface like metal. I don't know. Okay, this doesn't make sense. Another surface like marble. It adds such a texture. And all of these textures and surfaces are parametric, which means, like, for example, if I add let's say marble, okay, and click on this image, okay, this is not so parametric. Let's do another thing. Let's add a noise. Okay, let's add a noise, and you'll see that, and I'll disable the reflectance again. You'll see that a pattern is applied on top of this, a noise pattern. So if you click here and go to the shader, you can change how this pattern behaves. Okay, so for example, you can change the noise type to many different noise types there. Okay, you can change the octaves or increase degrees, or you can see that there are many different noise types. Okay, and each of them might be used to design a different kind of material. Okay, so this noise type is also valid for this displacer here. You can add noise to displace geometries, or this is a shader, so it's a procedural texture generator that allows you to create noise textures. So you can use this as a material channel in your materials. So if I, for example, delete this clear, you can delete these textures by again hitting this arrow and hit clear, and that will zero out the material. And then instead of adding the color channel, let's add a noise to the reflectance channel and convert this type to GGX, and then add the noise as a texture. and go here, and let's, you see that that pattern there starts to become, starts to be defining where the reflective parts and rough parts will be. So if you assign this black and white texture, it behaves like a mask that adjusts the reflective properties of this. For example, let's create box. This is, and if you maybe increase the contrast of this noise material, by the way, you can, this is a very low res noise. If you go to options menu here and select high quality noises, it will allow you to see that noise pattern in a much more detailed way. Okay, so I can, yeah, and it updates in real time, okay, when I do this. Okay, so if you, here in the noise pattern properties, if you increase contrast, you'll see that noise pattern becomes much sharper, so that the parts that are reflective and the parts that are not reflective are sharply distinguished from each other. Okay, so if you increase the scale of the noise or decrease it, you'll see how it behaves, right? Of course, now the noise is driving also the color value, so you can change the color value of this. So instead of, okay, you can do that by the mix mode. You mix this color with this texture by using this slider here, or you can go to the noise and change the color. For example, I want this white part to be blue and black part to be red. And you can see how it behaves, right? Okay, so reflections work like this, and I'll create another material and another object. Okay, and add a new material, assign this to here, and add, oh, this is silly. Okay, so another type is the bump channel, and another channel is the bump channel. So instead of, okay, let's create color and reflectance and the bump. And if you go to bump and add a noise texture, you'll see that it has created a bumpy looking surface. Okay, but this does not change the general form of the object. It rather makes it appear as if it's bumped, right? So I can change these values. Okay, and you can see that the surrounding space is not changed. It's a complete sphere, but it seems as if this surface details are a wavy looking like thing, right? So all these different material types behave differently, right? Of course, this can be used to design UI elements that appear as bumped surfaces. Okay, for example, let's 3D UI texture, I don't know, let's see, texture map, let's say. Okay, that won't work here maybe. Okay, just keep in mind that this bump channel allows you to create surface imperfections or dents or bumps on the surface. Okay, so for example, if I disable the color channel and if I go to the reflectance and go and make it like something like a mirror again, you'll see that how it has become a surface with these bumps and dents on the surface, so that it starts to reflect the environment in a distorted way. So you can adjust the strength like this, and let's change that. Yeah, this can give you very interesting results. Okay, you can see how it behaves. So one last channel maybe we can talk about would be not last but transparent. Okay, transparency is another important one. So if you, for example, if you enable transparency, okay, it makes the object obviously transparent, right? So I'll create another thing, drag here, and let me check the timing. Half an hour, okay. So if I create another material, assign this to that, and enable the transparency channel here, you'll see that now we started to see through the object. And if you go here, the options in the viewport, and check transparency, it will help you display the transparent materials in a better way. Okay, so but these transparent materials will come up, reach to their full potential when they are rendered. So in your viewport, transparent materials are not so beautifully rendered. Okay, so click here, go transparency, reflection presets are, for example, you can define different material types. And for example, I can change the color here, absorption color, or maybe not absorption, but transparent color. Okay, let's disable that. Okay, you see that when you look through this, it becomes reddish. Let's transform it into white again. And if you hit this button here, render viewport, you'll see that your objects are being rendered. Okay, so now maybe, okay, I'll add a plane here so that maybe this transparency becomes more apparent. So if I hit render, okay, because probably it's a PBR material, it's not. Okay, let's change this. No. Let's disable reflectance. Okay, if you disable reflectance, it becomes a complete glass-like object. And if I hit render, let's see. Okay, I'll just pop this up and scale this down. It's probably taking all the floor's color. I hit render again. Okay, you now see that it becomes something like a glass orb, right? So if you change that and if you hit Command Render, Command R or Control R on your viewport, you see that it becomes a transparent item there. So if I move this like that and render them like this, okay. So transparent objects are like this. So if I add a bump channel on that and go to the bump here and add a noise, now you see that a little preview of that object here. You can right click and select large, no, sorry, default. Okay, you can create a preview, magnified preview image there. And you can change this scaling of this texture or scale it down, and it can create an illusion that it's a wavy water bubble maybe. See? So maybe this noise is still a little bit a little bit small, so I can increase the scale of the noise so that it becomes a larger pattern there. So yeah, now it becomes a wavy material, like let's say water bubble like, water level like object. So let's render here. Yeah, transparency works like this. And if I add that material to the queue here, let's move this up. It becomes something like this. Okay, and notice that how it has sharp edges. So it's as if these textures are covered on top of the surface there. It does not change the shape of the object that you're assigning this material to. That is done by using this displacement channel here, okay? And if you use this displacement, and for example, I'll just cut this noise or hit copy shader from here and add that to, paste that to the displacement channel there, and clear this bump channel by hitting this clear button so that it's not bumped, but it's displaced now, and enable sub-polygon displacement, okay? And now if I hit Command R or Control R, you'll start to see that the edges or the borders of this material started to get distorted. You can see that here, and you can see it from here. Okay. So if you want to distort the edges of the object that you're using, you need to use a displacement channel. So, and adjust this sub-polygon displacement checkbox to the checked state. Okay, so by the way, glass materials will take longer times to render because it requires much more intense calculations than these regular materials. So if I make this like this and hit render, you'll see that it's immediately rendered. But when there are glass objects, it takes so much more time to render. Okay. So it's basically like this. And for example, you'll be dealing with these PBR materials, and you can adjust different material settings and assign different objects and layers. And I'll show you one last thing, which is an important part in material design and also for your projects. So instead of adding procedural textures that are existing here, by the way, you should check these out. You should check these different textures and what they do. You can load an image texture. Okay. So what that can do is, for example, of course there are many material and texture sources on the internet, but also since you have Creative Cloud subscriptions, one nice way of doing things might be generating seamless patterns in Photoshop. So for example, you can generate an image of, for example, seamless oil paint texture. Let's try this. If you write seamless, it creates a pattern that can infinitely be repeated, and there is no edges of the pattern. There's no visible edges. So let's check the options. Okay, this might be seamless, but no. Okay, let's try this. This is not seamless. Let's try. Okay. It kind of works, but not that well maybe. So try another method of seamless oil paint texture and write pattern maybe. Okay, let's try this one. Okay, this seems to be working. Okay, this one. I'll save this as a PNG file. Okay. And let's say and then use that. Okay, why? Like this. Okay. So I'll use that as a pattern. That can be repeated, right? So I'll click here and go enable color, or let's say not color and add it on the reflectance channel, let's say. I'll add load image, go to the place that I saved and hit the pattern. It asks me to whether copy that image to my project folder. I don't want it. And yeah, you can see now that texture is wrapped around my object. So now you can use that texture as a material. So this can be UI elements and this can be other elements as well. So what happens if I add that to this? Let's see. Okay, it becomes something like that. So instead of, let's play with the material properties. So again, go to GGX. Okay, this becomes like a reflective painty look. So if I hit render, okay, since there is nothing to reflect on top, it becomes dark. But let's see this part where the scene is brighter. Okay. So yeah, you can use any texture that you generate by using such methods. Okay. So one last thing that I'll show in this session is how this texture that you're using is wrapped around this object that you're generating or that you created. For example, let's create a text object, let's say, and add that material to your text object. Oops, sorry. Now it is a completely different kind of wrapping. And maybe let's play with the roughness. Okay. Maybe play with the mix strength. No. Okay, anyway, I'll make it again a little bit rough. Okay. So when you click on these material tags, each of them has different parameters. Okay, it writes its name, material name, and projection display, projection, and then that kind of stuff. For example, if you click on this cube and click on the material tag, you can adjust how many tiles it will be repeated in each direction. For example, let's go to this and go to here and increase tiles in U and V directions so that you can see that you are tiling them more and more, right? If you write whole numbers, the edges will not be, or the boundaries will not be repeated, or like it will be a seamless repetition. And also maybe I want to, by the way, I want to add this texture to the bump channel also. So I'll just copy this shader, the image shader, and create a bump channel. Go to the bump and, sorry, paste that to the bump channel also. So then you start to see how the surface strength or the oil paint texture becomes more accentuated, maybe emphasized, maybe. So it becomes something like you can see, right? And yeah, if I, for example, render this, Of course, when there it's pixelated in the viewport, but if you render that, it becomes a much higher quality image. Okay. So yeah, you can add realism to your textures by adding the same image to your bump channel. Okay. Oh, and okay, so one last thing that I was showing was when you click on the material tag here, you'll see the projection part here. So it is the way that the texture is wrapped around an object. So let's, for example, let's change that for the sphere. So instead of UV mapping, I can go cylindrical so that it wraps the texture as if it's wrapping it around a cylinder. If it's flat, it projects the texture from one direction and it's smeared through the edges and reflected back onto the back side. If it's cubic, it projects the texture as if it's wrapped around the cube. If it's frontal, it will be, no matter what, wherever you look, it will be flat, and it will be a flat image. If it's spatial, I'm not very sure how it does this projection. UV mapping, it's the default UV of that object. But if you don't create the UV of the object, for example, such as this, it won't function that beautifully. For example, for this kind of objects, you can select cubic projection so that you see a much proper texture distribution there. Of course, like you can change and try different projection mapping methods so that it's best for your case. Okay. So UV mapping is another is a subject of a different lecture. Maybe that's a whole set of different methods, and it requires time. But for your projects, we'll be mainly using cubic projection and see some workarounds. So as you have some problems in the projection and texture mapping sides concepts, we'll work that out in the following weeks. Okay, and that's all for now for the material part. See you on the next session.